This comparison is going to be an interesting one for me because these two are two of my newest condenser microphones, at least as far as my career is concerned. And I'm not really sure about them. They're really microphones that need specific situations to shine. Welcome back to the Rebel Tech channel. I'm Justin, and in this video we're going to be comparing two condenser microphones, two budget condenser microphones, the Lewitt LCT 240 Pro and the Sterling SP150, 150, and really seeing if which budget microphone is right for you. There are certain things that go into microphones that really make you decide that this is the one for me. Now, the Lewitt here is known for being a brighter microphone, while the Sterling is a not very well-known brand. In my experience, it seems a little bit mid-forward. It might be on that neutral side, but I'm going to let you guys decide on which one you guys like more, and in the outro I'll give my breakdown of all the tests that I do. So first, let's get into the builds of these microphones. When you feel these microphones, they feel pretty sturdy. They feel nice and they don't feel cheap. If you know what a cheap microphone feels like, you know what I'm talking about. Like, it feels hollow inside. And a lot of people don't think that's a big deal, which I can understand. I mean, the sound of a microphone is what matters. But in my mind, the build is a big part because it shows that the microphone was given some extra body to it. It was given some extra thought, I guess, in that department. Doesn't mean that it's going to be better in sound, but I think that's a good thing to have. So with the Lewitt, I give it a slight edge in this department because the grill is definitely better. I think it's got that extra layer there, which certainly helps. In the booth, we'll do a plosive test and a tap test where we tap the whole mic stand, the mount itself, the microphones, and see if there's any weird sounds that come out of it. So next up, I'm going to leave up all the tech and specs side by side with these two microphones, and then we're going to do a noise test and a off-X rejection test. Alright, so you may have heard my camera focusing. You may hear my computer and maybe some hums in the air, stuff like that. I did boost it up in post, so keep that in mind when you're listening to this and making a judgment call on it. So in my experience, I think the Sterling has a little bit more noise to it, and the Lewitt probably is better in that department. But in the outro, I'll let you know for sure in those specific tests if I heard anything. And let me know down in the comments if you heard anything. Next up, let's do a distance and off-axis. So I'm about 2 feet away from the fronts of these microphones. They're both cardioid polar patterns, meaning they pick up in the front to reject the sides, reject the back. Now, it's a rejection. It's not a full silence, obviously. If you know microphones, you know that they don't completely deaden their surrounding sound. But this is what it's going to sound like at a distance. Time for off-axis. 90-degree test, about 2 feet away from the Lewitt, on the Lewitt side. And this is what it's going to sound like in my mildly treated studio down here. Not too crazy, but it's got some soft surfaces. It's a small area, so it's not too crazy. It has a carpet as well, so you got the soft surfaces where they matter. It's a wood ceiling, which not as reflective of it as drywall, but can be reflective. In my experience in this room, it's a pretty good room to record in. It's not perfect, but it's the best I can do right now. Next up, stage, whatever. That's the stage, so stage right. Yeah. Is that stage right? I don't know. I don't know anymore. I've been working on a stage crew for a while, and I get it wrong sometimes. I forget that that's the stage. I am the talent, or I try to be talent. not much talent going on here. Just a madman talking in a small room. So 90 degrees, Sterling side about 2 feet away. Next, we're going to do 180 degrees. Okay, about 2 feet away from the rears of the microphones. Like I said, these both are cardioid polar patterns rejecting the back of the microphone. This is just a test to see how well it does in the direct line of sight for me talking. You might get some reflection off the wall behind the camera, but I will say that there's a lot of stuff on the wall, so you're probably not going to get direct reverberation. You might get a little bit. All right, so that's in the studio here. We're going to the booth right now, going to roll down the walls, and it's not a perfect booth, but it's a pretty decent area to record in. It's not super quiet, but it reduces the reflections, and I do my best. It's the best thing I got right now. Eventually, one day, I will have a built area in my own house, which would be really cool to have. So let's get to it. All right, so we're in the booth right now with the Sterling SP150 and the Lewitt LCT 240 Pro. A lot more words in the Lewitt. This is the second time I'm recording this because I'm a dum-dum and I don't know what the front of a microphone looks like. Yeah. The Sterling is very deceiving, so the logo is the side that you talk into, not the back. There's also a cardioid polar pattern here that I did not look at. All right, so listening to the Sterling right now. And there's a hiss to it. It's not as much as I had when I was facing the wrong way, but there's a bit of a hiss to it. Not too bad. But I noticed that it's a kind of a mid-forward microphone, at least with my voice. And it could be a bit nasally. So keep that in mind if you have a nasally voice. Like I'm a little bit congested right now. Not crazy, but a little bit. And yeah, let's switch to the Lewitt. All right, so on the Lewitt right now, you know what? I actually really like this tone now. I don't know why. It's a little more neutral than I thought. And I don't know. Maybe it's more natural than I thought. I thought it was a bright microphone when I first got it, but I've mentioned this a couple of times. I want to revisit all the microphones that I've covered because you hear things differently. Your ears change over time, and different people hear different things at different points in their life. Just like taste buds change, sight changes, and we see, we feel, all our senses change over time. So maybe I'll just have a different opinion on these mics. My personal preference is a darker microphone, but with this mic, it was more on that high end that I was not big on. And I still hear like the high end there, but it's not as emphasized, or at least that's not how I remember it. This could be just me misremembering it. I don't know. But it's known for being a brighter microphone. And has that presence, that sparkly presence up top, if you like that. Now, let's do a plosive test. Yeah, use a pop filter with a condenser mic. It's definitely not something to mess around with. Now, we're going to do a tap test on a regular mic stand with a weight on the bottom. So I'm going to work my way up. I like the Sterling. I don't love it. For the price. Obviously, when I say I like something and I am a fan of it or whatever it is, the price is definitely something to consider. Because depending on how you get this mic, it's under $100, especially if you get it with a bundle. If you think on a curve like that. But solo, it's $100. And when you think of that, this sound, for example, if this sound came from a mic that was like 10 times the price, you would think, oh, this is an awful microphone. It's the worst microphone ever made. Well, It's a $100 microphone. Does it sound like a $100 microphone? Yeah, kind of. It sounds like a $100 microphone. Now on the Lewitt, that's something that is more of a, I don't know, it has a higher quality to it. Not much, but just like the price difference ratio, the quality difference ratio is there. Maybe a little bit more. Like, for example, this sounds like a $100 microphone. This one, about $150 or so. It sounds like a $200 microphone, maybe, depending on the day, depending on you hearing it. Let me know what you think about that. Let me know how these things sound. Let me know your opinions. And all I ask is you be nice. If you want to leave a comment specifically about the booth section, write down booth before you did the comment. Because I want to know the specific section you're talking about. Because sometimes people leave comments and I'm not really sure which part you're talking about. So be specific so I know what you're talking about and we can have that conversation a little more fluent. We're going to go to the untreated room, a little more reflective, less acoustically pleasing. All right, so untreated room with the Lewitt LCT 240 Pro and the Sterling SP150. This is my bedroom here, and we have an area rug underneath me and a wood floor as well. The doors open to a hallway and a window right here, so you get some reflection off of that as well. We're closer to the wall behind the camera, which is about like 3 feet away from me and the microphones. And then behind me is about like 12 feet or so. So keep that in mind when you're thinking of the dimensions of your room relative to this room. So for these tests, we're going to do just like we did down in the studio. We're going to do distance, off axis, and all that fun stuff. All right, I'm about like 5 to 6 feet away from the fronts of the microphones. This is what it's going to sound like in the untreated room. Flat ceiling with just a light on it, so you got some reflections there. A little bit of wood, well, a lot of bit of wood floor, but there are area rugs above it, so that helps a little bit. There's the bed, which dampens the sound. These shelves here have a lot of stuff on them, so that might not be a problem, but it could be a little echoey depending on your positioning of the microphones. Alright, on the Lewitt side, 90 degrees, this is what it's going to sound like in the untreated room, speaking towards the hallway, so you could get some echo there. Just a little bit of variety so you guys can get some examples of maybe something relative to you. If I do miss something or if I haven't covered anything that may be specific to your situation, let me know and I'll try my best to give that example in some way, some form. Now 90 degrees on the Sterling side, I'm a little closer to it than I was the Lewitt. And this is what it's going to sound like in the untreated room, speaking towards the window, and maybe you got some reflections coming off that window. Maybe you have some echo here from the hallway. A lot of things, a lot of variables. There's a mirror behind the camera as well, so all this stuff comes into play when recording and dealing with sound samples. 180 degree test in the untreated room. This is what it's going to sound like, speaking towards the wall that's about 3 feet away to the rears of the microphones. I'm curious to see what the reflection back is going to be, but we'll see. Let me know down in the comments what you think, and remember to put the specific area, meaning the environment that it's in, before you leave like a specific comment on the sound. So if you have like, oh, it sounds echoey or whatever it is, just write down which section you're talking about so we could have a more fluent conversation with it. Okay, down to the studio. I'm going to listen to all these samples and I'll give you my impression on how these sound. So as you can see here, I got the blue one, the SP150, the Sterling, as my choice between these two. Now, the Lewitt is a good microphone, and I really do think that it came down to personal preference. The thing that keeps coming up with that Lewitt, the LCT 240 Pro, is the fact that it's a little bright for my taste. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a bad microphone. It doesn't mean that this one's necessarily better. But it has to do with the simple fact that my personal preference is a darker microphone or a more neutral microphone. I like to put my own flavor on a microphone when I can. Now, certain microphones like the Shure SM7B, the AT4040, they have a tone that I really like, and it doesn't really need a lot of work from my personal preference. Now, when it comes to other microphones, like for example, if I was to be recording someone and they're not sure what kind of sound they're looking for, I want a more neutral sounding microphone, good quality microphone, obviously, but you want a more neutral sounding microphone so you can play with it and mess around with it and make it the way they want to sound. Now, eventually, when someone gets more experienced or if they know what they want, then they could get a microphone to put forward their best performance, get the tone they're looking for naturally so that there's less work on the back end. I also am a firm believer that you should try to get less work on the back end so that it's not as processed. So let's get into my notes on why I think this microphone is the better choice, at least in my opinion. So starting off with the studio end, the low end was nice on the Sterling, and it was a little sibilant on the Lewitt. Now that makes sense because sibilant noises, meaning S's and other bursts of air in that high frequency, does get picked up more when a microphone has more emphasis on their high end, which the Lewitt does. Then when it comes to noise, they're pretty much the same. I didn't really notice too much of a difference when it comes to like ambient noise and like levels of it. It was pretty spot on. Maybe it was one way or another, like one was better than the other, but from what I can hear, it was pretty much the same or close enough, especially if you consider the price. Now to the off axis with the studio. The distance was about the same, like I said, based on my personal hearing of it and listening. Let me know if you think differently, and if you leave comments down below, let me know which section you're talking about before you leave a comment. 90 degrees, I think the Sterling sounds a little bit better, at least in the studio section. And then 180, some more high end on the Lewitt and more low end presence on the Sterling. So pretty much a wash on that one, but I will give a slight edge to the Sterling on the off axis. Also consider the price. It's a little cheaper for the Sterling, so I'm going to grade a little bit on a curve, but not much because the price isn't that like crazy. Now for the booth. I prefer the sound of the Sterling, but I did say in my notes, it's even based on your preference. If you like a brighter microphone, then you're probably going to lean towards the Lewitt rather than the Sterling. But if you're looking for something a little closer to the neutral side, it could be considered dull and like not very appealing. Like there's nothing to it, no meat on the bones. Then you go with the Lewitt because it's got more texture and more vibrance. I don't know. I think that the Sterling definitely gives you a more well-rounded sound. Maybe. That's just how I heard it, but let me know what you think. But to give the Lewitt a little bit of a boost up, the tap test was definitely better on the Lewitt. Now, lastly, in the untreated room, I noticed that the Sterling has a little less noise as far as acoustically speaking. It definitely had not as much of bouncing back. It could have been the position of the mic. It could have been anything. It could have been the day. I don't know. But from what I heard in that example, it was a little bit better. And also, I am considering the price as well. And now to the off axis. The distance was about the same. Pretty consistent. 90 on the SP150 and 180 on the SP150 by a slight margin. It's not much, but if I was to choose one, I think I'm going to choose this one. And my final opinion on these microphones, my final thoughts on how these microphones performed, at least in the tests that I have. There's plenty of tests. There's an infinite amount of tests you can do. With these tests and the examples that I gave, the Sterling was a better performer all around. And I say that with my personal preference in mind. It's skewed. Yes, I admit it. I'm skewed in the way that I'm just giving my personal preference out there. But I will say that if you like a microphone that is more bright, some microphone that's gonna emphasize those high ends a little bit more, go with the Lewitt. It's a great microphone. Solid build and solid construction. People love the Lewitt sound. Me personally, I'm not big on them, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad microphone. It's just my personal preference. I like darker microphones. That's just the way I am. So that's pretty much it. My choice is the Sterling between these two. I have plenty of more comparisons and stuff to come out. I'm comparing this to the AT4040 coming out soon, and I think I did a couple before. I'll leave them in the outro. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you liked the video, please hit the like button down below. It'd be greatly appreciated. If you like my vibe around here, please consider subscribing. I got more videos coming out. It's been kind of slow right now because I've been kind of busy, but stick around. I noticed that the community's building, even though I haven't been posting many videos, but it's nice to see people sticking around and engaging in the videos. So let's keep this going. Let's hopefully get some more time to make videos and hopefully gets around to streaming. I have this thing, Darth Vader's helmet or head, depending on if you think his head's in there. I guess really it's a full construction, so his head is in there, depending on if it's Luke's head or Anakin's. But regardless of Star Wars nerd stuff, if you're interested in any live streams or anything like that, anything specific, I do dot-to-dot art. I play video games, all stuff like that. If you have something that you want to see, maybe if you wanted me to test a microphone on stream, let me know down in the comments. All I ask is just be nice and have a conversation with me. Don't just throw stuff out there. I want to have a conversation with people. That's the point of this channel, to talk to people. The Discord is also available if you're interested in having a more in-depth conversation and maybe some back and forth. I'm not on there all the time because I only go on my computer. I don't go on my phone, so keep that in mind. Now, without me babbling any further, thank you all for watching again. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, I will see you rebels in the next video.